So we're getting ready to begin the session 4, week 4. And what we want to do is always keep in mind that the purpose of this course is to get us to manifest power, manifest the inherent power that is within us all in terms of melanin. This is what we're referring to as the God, or a better term, divine particle that is, again, resident and inherent in all of us. But it's one thing to say that and to understand the science of it, to understand the history of it, as we're going to do and as we've been doing. But the one thing that we want to always keep in mind that, again, this course is about the demonstration of that power, of that inherent power, and the activation of dark matter energy, or dark consciousness, again, that is within all of us. So we've covered a few things, and we've made the statement that activated melanin, and that is neuromelanin, is what we're focusing on. The eumelanin that is in the skin is important. The skin is the largest organ on the body, and our ability to absorb and to translate sunlight to energy is very important. The concentration of melanin that are in the ears, that is in the tongue, that is in the pupils of the eye, that is in the male and female sex organs, all very important, but not as important as neuromelanin, which is, as we stated, is a deep tissue phenomenon. And it is actually the beginning of life in biogenesis. When we're born, when we're in our mother's womb, it is the beginning of life. And from a small black dot of melanin, this is what we are formed from. So we understand the generative power of melanin. The type of power that I'm referring to in terms of activated melanin, and again, activated melanin or neuromelanin is the only source of genuine divine power It's the only source of genuine divine power in heaven and on earth. The power that we're talking about, we're going to use the Greek word. It is called dunamis. Dunamis. Namis. It looks like dynamis, but it is dunamis. However, it is the same root word that we get the English words dynamic and dynamite from. Dunamis. And as it is used in the scriptures, it is referring to miraculous power. This is the power that this course is designed to connect us to. So again, we never want to lose sight of that. Miraculous power. The word dunamis also refers to the actual miracle itself. The actual miracle itself. And it speaks, that's this word dunamis, or power, miraculous power. It speaks of ability, abundance, meaning, and might in terms of a mighty deed. Also, it refers to the worker of miracles. And again, the power, the strength to work miraculous power, to work miracles. But this is just the natural ability, the inherent ability of activated melanin. Outside of the earth realm or outside of the material world, melanin, again, is referred to as dark matter and dark energy. And dark matter and dark energy composes the vast majority of what we call the known universe. So there is no higher science, no higher knowledge than knowledge of dark matter, knowledge of dark energy, and there is no life, no real life, no genuine life without the demonstration and the presence of that miraculous power that our forefathers, our foremothers, our ancestors demonstrated on a regular basis when consciousness, when we were in a cycle where consciousness was and high vibratory states were the norm. So we fell out of that, and it wasn't a mistake. We're learning that we have to frame this thing accurately as we frame the history of melanated people. We have to frame it accurately. And there was no mistake that was made that our current condition was achieved through divine foreknowledge or divine knowledge of forethought. And over the last few sessions, we've gone to great detail to document this aspect of truth. And we've done it via syncretizing the ancient myths, creation narratives, and allegories that are located in sacred documents, such as our Bible. And we're going to continue to do so. So, again, this power that we want to connect ourselves to through activating our neuromelanin is miraculous power, divine power. It is the actual miracle itself that proves that you have this power and that you are a worker of miracles, that you are demonstrating power and strength, dunamis, dynamic power. So again, it's inherent power that resides in all of us by virtue of our nature. And it is all about, again, exerting this power and making it manifest, performing miracles. How? By virtue of our own ability, our own resource, and our state, not of mind, but the quality of our thoughts, the vibratory rate of our thoughts. Melanin, neuromelanin, is the only substance that connects us to divinity and divine power. Dr. Lilia Africa states that melanin is the key chemical to life and all living things. It is the powerful dark matter consciousness, and again, that's a word, a term that we'll use, dark matter consciousness, that connects us to all creation. Melanin is important because it's the most primitive and universal pigment in all living organisms. Melanin is abundantly present within each and every living organ, which aids the human body. Melanin is a superconductor. It always stays charged when it is exposed to things such as light, sound, and color. In fact, it absorbs and is reactive to the full spectrum of energy, the full electronic spectrum of energy. So we have to understand, and we've been giving, again, great detail in understanding and comprehending how we lost this connection with this miracle working power. Now, again, this is something that has not been covered or studied as I've done my research too often. There's a lot of very good books and details about melanin and how miraculous it is and how powerful it is, but very little attention is paid to, well, how did we lose this connection? So we have that answer, and we're going to take a lot of time in providing the evidence of that, because we need to understand and we need to have a comprehensive and clear understanding of the framework, historically, prophetically, energetically, of how we've come to this pass. And again, how we lost this connection with the divine. So when you read the Bible and you go by the surface interpretation, the literal interpretation of the Hebrew script and the Greek script of the Bible, you come up with the various doctrines that most major religions, Judeo-Christian religions, and belief systems, their offshoots, you come to the conclusion that their various doctrines lead you to. And that is that you did something wrong and you're being punished from it. God turned his back on you. However, whatever name you call God or however you view God. And so we try to stay away from that term God, as we've stated before, and we refer to the divine, because these belief systems and the conclusions that are made from surface understandings are erroneous, and they will not, they have not, they cannot lead individuals back to that connection. Our predicament, again, began with divine knowledge of forethought on the part of our ancestors. And as this thing was rendered with science, it has to be understood in scientific terms. And again, we've stated that in manifesting, when the divine, which is outside of time, manifests into the physical planes, manifest into physical realms like the earth realm, there is an immediate loss of consciousness, which causes us to have to reboot. And there is a flaw that is possibly created thereby. Now I'm talking about energetically. Energetically. And we saw last week when we looked at the Gnostic tale of the Ion Sophia. Now, understand that when you look at these various myths and allegories, and you see, like in this stela, a woman present. Now, this is the creation narrative. When you see a woman present, that always represents wisdom. That always represents wisdom. In the Bible story, when you see Kava and you read the narrative, it might seem like it is a story that has a lot of happenstance in it. And for sure, when we had a surface understanding of the Bible story of Adam and Eve, when I say kava, that's what I mean, Eve, we thought that this was just, a mistake and human behavior. But again, when you see the feminine as being the lead character, like we're going to review the Ion Sophia, you understand that this is divine, that the narrative is talking about divine knowledge of forethought. Sophia, when we look at the definition of that name, talks about wisdom. And even in the Bible narrative, when you look at Proverbs, and when it speaks of wisdom, it characterizes wisdom as feminine, the divine feminine in all ancient stories, in all ancient narratives, allegories, tales, and myths. The divine feminine always bespeaks wisdom and knowledge. So when you see the feminine character active, again, we must translate that, or we must interpret it or perceive it as that there is something that is being worked or something that is being accomplished as the narrative unfolds. So we can think of these things as a moral to the story. When we used to listen to fairy tales, and again, allegories are much more serious and less frivolous than fairy tales. But I'm just using fairy tales to point to the fact that when we read these fairy tales, there's always a moral. So it talks about forethought in the creation of the narrative. It speaks of forethought in creation of the narrative, that there was a point being made. So again, when you see the feminine or a female character that is active within a tale, it always bespeaks that there is a higher understanding that the writer of the allegory, the writer of the myth, the teller of the tale wants you to see and consider at the end of the tale. Same way again, when we talked about this primordial plunge of Ion Sophia in the waters below. Again, when melanated or dark energy beings, dark energy or dark matter beings emanate into the material realms and disconnect from the source, it creates an area of weakness or a vulnerable spot, or as we call it in general, it creates a flaw. It creates a flaw. And again, the entire framework of our history has to do with working this flaw out within the material realms. So when we look at the story of Achilles and we look at the character of Achilles and we look at the narrative of Achilles, we find that his mother, Thetis, was actively involved in the narrative. And the story of Achilles, and we're all familiar with the Achilles heel, they're pointing out an area of weakness in an individual who is strong, who is supposed to be strong, who is supposed to be mighty, who is supposed to be a miracle worker, who is supposed to be a miraculous human being. So again, this is just another version of our history. So in Greek mythology, getting to the narrative, when Achilles was a baby, it was foretold that he would die young. Let's take a look at that. Again, we must keep in mind that when we emanate, when melanated beings emanate into the physical realms, there is a flaw that is apparent and a probability, not a certainty, but a probability that this flaw will manifest itself. So the Greek mythological tale of this starts out when Achilles was a baby, and it was foretold that he would die young. Again, if a child dies young, then from a natural sense, there is a flaw or some type of defect that is present. To prevent his death, again, knowledge of forethought. His mother, Thetis, again, wisdom, took Achilles to the river Styx. And we pointed out last week that in the cosmic tale of the Ion Sophia, that the river Styx represented the waters below, which was supposed to offer powers of invulnerability or immortality, and dipped his body into the water. However, as she, Thetis, held Achilles by the heel, his heel was not washed over by the water of the magical river. Again, it seems like Thetis was negligent, or that there was a mistake or an oversight. Actually, again, the feminine character represents knowledge and wisdom. This flaw or this weakness or this vulnerable spot was left purposefully for a divine purpose, for a higher purpose. So in the myth, again, divine knowledge of forethought. So his heel, that is an aspect, as we talked before, of generative, reproductive, regenerative, sexual, um, or creative ability, something that was related to birth in the physical, but that also corresponded to an energetic area of weakness or vulnerability as well, because the energetic or vibratory aspect always precedes what? The material manifestation or the physical aspect. There's always a correspondence between the energetic, or what we call the spiritual, and the material or the physical. Achilles indeed grew up to be a man of war who survived many great battles. And he not only survived many great battles, he demonstrated again an aspect or a degree of this dunamis, of this dynamic physical ability, to the point where it was super physical or supernatural. All right, miraculous. However, one day a poisonous arrow shot at him and was lodged in his heel, killing him shortly afterwards. So again, the use of the term Achilles' heel is an expression meaning an area of weakness, a vulnerable spot, or as we say, a flaw. All right. So we pointed out last week, and we went into detail. And if you want a reminder, you can go back and look at the uh, recording or the video, go back over the notes, and I'll be sending more notes out for this class. It talked about this genetic flaw, which we refer to as a colocutaneous albinism, that results in not only a deficiency of melanin in the skin and in the eyes and in the ears, etc., but also, and more importantly, perhaps, in the deep tissue phenomena of neuromelanin. So we took a look and we syncretized the ancient knowledge of the four worlds, of the four realms, with melanosomal maturation, where we saw that of the four stages of melanin maturation or melanosomal maturation in a cutaneous albinism, or OCA2, as we see here, it bypasses the first stage, enters into the second stage, which corresponds to the waters of Bria in the creative process, in the generative or creative process, and we end up with the manifestation of a flaw or a pathogen, and we'll define that later, a pathogen, which is termed OCA, or occult cutaneous albinism. of which there are three types. All right. So, so much for the review. Excuse me. So we want to look at, in this session, take a closer look at the fact that our history, especially within the last 6,000 years, specifically, is no mistake. Now, prior to that, it is no mistake either. But we are just taking a attenuated look, a short look, historically speaking, and getting a clear comprehension, or trying to achieve a clear comprehension of this framework. Excuse me. I'm going to put this on pause for a second. Excuse me, teaching all these classes and doing all this talking at times is hard on my throat. So I hope you all will bear with me.
We will.
All right. So we're looking at the aspect that our history was no mistake. It was no punishment by an outraged, angry God, quote unquote, but that this was all done through divine knowledge of forethought. Reading from Second Esdras, the 6th chapter, verses 6 through 9, listen carefully. Then did I consider these things, and they were all made through me alone, and through none other. By me also they shall be ended, and by none other. Consider that, because that is exactly what we are putting forth. That as we consider these things, we should be of the understanding that they were all made through us alone, through none other, and by us they shall be ended, and by none other. You souls, you divine souls, have shown up along with me at this particular point in history to put an end to this, to cut the lights out, and to close this particular chapter in our cosmic evolution. Then answered I and said, What shall be the parting asunder of the times? Or when shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? Very appropriate, because prophetically speaking, historically speaking, we are at this juncture between the end of a previous cycle, or the end of the first, and the beginning of the one that follows. In the scriptures, this is referred to as the tail becoming the head, or as someone else has paraphrased, the rise of Jacob is the fall of Esau. Esau being the firstborn, Jacob being the one that followed. And he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held fast the heel of Esau.
Excuse me. Do you want to take a break, a little bit of break, and get yourself together, do what you need to do?
It comes and goes, so if you don't mind, I'll struggle through it. If I need another break, I'll take it.
Okay.
So from Abraham to Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were first born, Jacob's hand held fast to the heel of Esau. For Esau is the end of the world, that is, this present age, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. So again, we're right at this juncture. The ending of the first age and the beginning of another. And I think I will take 10 minutes. I'm going to pause it here and take a 10-minute break and go gargle some warm water. So we're going to pause right here, and I'll be back in about 5-10 minutes. All right. After some quick triage and doctoring, we're ready to resume. So, again, we're talking about, even in second Esdras, they're talking about this aspect of generative ability that sets the framework for the what? The end of this age. That would be the purpose, according to the narrative, that would be the overall purpose. And that is to correct this flaw. That was what? Made through me alone and through no other, and by me also shall be brought to an end, and by no other. Now that should be very clear. So what we're talking about is the correction, specifically the flaw, of the manifestation of a recessive pathogen that is called occult cutaneous albinism. And we're going to understand that the leaders of the divine community that initiate and have initiated this change would be the divine feminine. That is Thetis, who grasped the heel to protect her son in the narrative of Achilles, Kava, or Eve, in the biblical story, that ate first from the forbidden tree and then gave to her husband, or the male. It is always the feminine that initiates. And as we look at this again from a historic standpoint and later a energetic standpoint, we're going to see that same pattern of the feminine being the initiator. And we see even in the tale of Enki and Ninmah, it is Ninmah who holds the Adamu, the hybrid, Niburian and Homo erectus being an ape that they made. My hands have made it, victoriously she shouts. So we're going to see this pattern. We see represented here in the Kemetan tale of Khanum that the male aspect of formative energy, represented by the four worlds, corresponds with Hechet, that gives life. It's the same story here. In this created story. And one of the things that we stated, that we are not created beings. We melanated individuals emanate. Although they are born, they emanate from the eternal because they are from the eternal. The history, we do not share a history with the Caucasoid. Their history, they know that they were created. And even their theories, which they know is not a theory of evolution, they know it's an accurate statement or an accurate rendition of what? The fact that our forefathers created them. This story and the truth of this story is related to the roots of racism and white supremacy. So this underlies everything. It underlies our history, And the great Frances Cress Welsing, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, stated in her Cress theory of color confrontation that was explicated in her book, The ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors. She explained that racism and white supremacy and its roots was in the fear of white genetic annihilation. They understand that they have an Achilles heel, that they are representative and emblematic of this Achilles heel, this bruised heel that again results in occult cutaneous albinism. The science was to isolate that particular pathogen, genetic pathogen, into one population. And that is precisely what occurred. And again, we've gone over that. So we're going to explore this a little bit further today. So our entire experience, what we experienced in terms of our first interactions with this genetic hybrid that we call the Caucasoid or the Caucasian, has its roots in something that our forefathers started with knowledge of forethought. So we want to, we've taken about a 6,000 year overview of this, connected it again to ancient myths, allegories, and narratives. And now we're going to take a look at this and focus in on the last 400 years. And again, we're going to focus on the emanation into history 400 years ago of these divine, eternal, dark matter beings, which were and are our beloved ancient ancestors. The scripture states that Laban had two daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And I want us to make a critical connection and syncretization and synthesis between Leah and Esau or Edom and Rachel and Jacob. All right? Because again, these are allegorical figures. They're definitely not historical figures. They are allegorical figures that represent types. And as Esau represents the recessive trait, genetic trait, or what we're going to refer to as a genetic pathogen called a colocutaneous albinism, or OCA, due to the fact that he came out red, like an hairy garment. In other words, he represented, again, this recessive pathogen that occurs randomly in dark skinned or melanated individuals within the physical plane or within the earth realm. So Leah representing or corresponding to Esau, and we're going to see why. The older or the elder sister, Esau being the elder brother, and Raquel, the younger, corresponding to Jacob, the younger brother, and Raquel representing an individual that exhibits and carries dominant genetic characteristics. Again, Leah referring to one that exhibits or carries the recessive pathogen, or the recessive pathogen, I should say. And this is proven in the next verse where it says Leah was tender-eyed, but Raquel was beautiful and well-favored. Now, what we want to do very quickly is to take a look at this word, well-favored, all right, in the Strong's Concordance. Well, actually, we're going to take a look at the word beautiful and the word well-favored in the Hebrew. The statement that Leah was tender-eyed corresponds to one of the traits of alcocutaneous albinism, which is there is a lack of melanin in the pupil of the eye. And there are problems. Okay, hold on one second. Having problems with the connection here. All right, let's try this again. Nope. Seems like we're having a problem with the internet. Dana. Yeah. We're knocked off again. Let me see. No, we're knocked off again. Okay. Wow. This is. Yeah, that's what mine said. Yeah. I didn't have. I lost.